As people trickle in, I'm going to go ahead and start introducing our wonderful panelists and our panel. So you're joining us today to talk a little bit about the different challenges that Muslims face while organizing in 2020. And as we delve into that, we're going to present a lot of information, which we will also offer at the end of the session. If you're interested, you can drop emails. Maybe we'll collect it from Netroots itself, and we'll be able to share with you some of the work that we've all collectively been doing on something called the Muslim Power Poll. So let's get started. So we have an amazing group of panelists today. We're joined by, actually, I was going to introduce everyone, but do folks just want to introduce themselves? So I'll go first. My name is Kifah Shah. I work at Empower Change. It's a digital-first grassroots Muslim-led organization, and I'm the senior campaign manager. Abbas.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Abbas Barzagar here, National Director of Research and Advocacy at the Council of American Islamic Relations.
Okay, I'll go. Hey, Salam. Good morning, everybody. I'm Warda Khalid. I am the founder and board president of Polygon Education Fund, which is a nonprofit national organization dedicated to strengthening Muslim engagement with Congress.
All right, I'll go, Gula. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Mohammed Missouri. I'm the executive director of a group called Jetpack. We're a nonprofit as well. Our mission is to increase representation of American Muslims in politics. Yeah, I'm going to Gula.
Hey, my name is Mohammed Gula, National Organizing Director of Engage Action, leading the Million Muslim Votes program this year for 2020, and a campaign strategist for upcoming minority candidates.
Thanks, everyone. All right, so let's hop into some questions. And our first questions are actually a really big question for our panelists. So what do you all think is the greatest challenge for Muslims across America in 2020? Whether that's related to elections or just in general, the political climate. But in your opinion, what is that big issue? I'm going to first pass it to Warda. It looks like you have an answer.
Yes, that's a really good question. The first thing that I thought of was the rise in white supremacy in the US and how that really trickles down and impacts a lot of different areas in the US and includes a negative impact on American Muslims. And so white supremacy goes along with bigotry and xenophobia, and these are some issues that we're seeing on the local, federal, and state level. We even have people representing those views in the White House, in the administration, in Congress, and so because of that, we have terrible hate crime laws or laws that are not harsh enough. We have people that are we see police brutality. Some of those victims are Muslims that are Black people that are impacted by police brutality. And then just the day-to-day civil rights of American Muslims to live, worship as they want. We have a rise in anti-Sharia legislation. People are, trying to, during coronavirus, close mosques and pretend, make up that they're meeting and when they're really not, and just another way to excuse their Islamophobia. So I think the rise of white supremacy is a huge threat for Muslims in America and the way that they can practice their faith and just allowing them to live in peace and safety here in the US.
Thanks, Warda. What do you think about that, Abbas?
No, I mean, obviously, to echo and plus one everything Warda just said, there are these larger structures that constitute sort of, the seedbed of the challenges that we face. However, I'd like to just mention an internal challenge that we have as a Muslim community, and that is a lot of people don't actually understand how diverse of a community we actually are, racially, ethnically, sectarian identity, religious orientation. And for people outside of our community, the best way that I could describe it is that when you say Muslims in America, it's almost like saying from a religious studies perspective or kind of an anthropological perspective, Protestants in America. Well, what does that mean? It's everything, you know, and we have so many different kinds of community affiliation groups that the basic mechanics of organizing are, I believe, some of our biggest internal challenges that we have. How is it that we can overcome racial divides? How is it that we can overcome income gaps, generational gaps? How is it that we can overcome all of these challenges and even understand our own community? So I think that we're all learning on the job as we go, but I've always found that to be the most difficult challenge that we have.
Yeah, that's so important and such a great way to, like a caveat to definitely add at the beginning of this conversation. What about you, Mohammed Gullah?
I was hoping you say Mohammed and I'd still pass it over to Siri. You know, I was actually going to speak on the diversity piece because I do think that that is a challenge that we do go over. But I'll also add that one thing that I do think that we will struggle with, I think will impact the turnout, at least in 2020, is going to be the access to the process. And this is what a lot of other Americans are also going to be impacted by, which is going to be language access for voting and or even at the polls, as well as early voting and misinformation. Because I do think that when we're talking about misinformation, now you're talking about multiple aspects of voter suppression. And so I think that one of the biggest challenges that I really worry about as we go into this election cycle or finish off this election cycle is how do we get that voter from home to the poll and or from their ballot from home to the poll and or at the polls. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Some real issues that we'll probably delve into that people are facing on the ground. And Mohammed, what do you think? Mohammed Missouri.
Yeah, so I think that so this is a crucial time in our history as a country, right? We're in a recession, an economic depression. We're facing a housing crisis, a student debt crisis, medical debt crisis, all these different things. And many people are working on to try to figure out how to recover from this, but also how to like stem this, terrible tide right now. And we're not included in the process. Whatever the policy we're talking about, and that whether it's being discussed on a local level or in Congress, Muslims are not included in the process, right? There's no outreach to us to different groups asking, well, you're impacted by this housing crisis too. So all these different task forces that have been formed that have the words equity in them, they don't include Muslim representation, right? And the only time we're involved is if it's a national security issue or, if it's a Muslim ban, obviously, like it's a civil rights issue that's specific to us, we're then involved. But yeah, same thing with I think Warda mentioned, mass incarceration and the fact that we're not involved in that conversation either, despite the fact that that Muslims are disproportionately impacted by mass incarceration. So I think as a general rule, one of the biggest challenges for us is that people still see us as an outlier in politics. And their first instinct is not to reach out and ask, for our involvement. That's obviously changing a little bit, and I think we saw with Vice President Biden, addressing a large group of Muslim, voters, that was led by Engage and Empower and some other groups. That was a very, it was a historic step to see a nominee for a party do that. But at the same time, you look at the panels next week at the DNC, there are no panels about how the Muslim vote can be crucial in up to 6 or 7 swing states. And I think, that undermines a lot of the work that we're doing, obviously. But at the same time, like I said, those are the growing pains, those are the challenges.
Thank you so much, everyone, for answering such a big question and kicking us off with a lot to think about already. And we already have some questions rolling in. David, I got your question, and I wanted to encourage people to continue to drop their questions in the Q&A part of the Zoom, and we will certainly get to questions in the end. We did make sure that there's time for that. So we're looking forward to answering any questions that you have. Please feel free to drop them in the Q&A function. So I am going to let each of our panelists take it away in their own sense and pose questions to each of them individually. So first, Abbas, you work at the intersection and look at some of the work that you do looks at the intersection of Islamophobia online, hate speech in general, and how that network only leads to more disinformation. So how does disinformation like that from the digital sphere move from the fringes into the mainstream? And how do you think that it impacts Muslims in America particularly?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. I do want to just sort of reemphasize, and the same message I had earlier about the sort of strategic gaps that we have in our community in terms of organizing. And I really lament the fact that we haven't been able to actually curate the relationships that we need at an organizational, institutional level to really wed our ethnic diversity in the community, namely the fact that there's no African-American Muslim representation on this panel is something that I, for one, have a lot of trouble with because I've dedicated a greater part of my academic life and community life to engaging with that community and learned and owe my own kind of dean to them in so many ways. And so, inshallah, this is something that we can work and grow through together. But let me go ahead and jump in to the report real quick, or to the discussion. Again, I think I have about 5 minutes. Is that right, Kifaya? So we have about 5 minutes, and I just want to preface this by saying that you hear the word misinformation or disinformation out there quite a bit these days. Since 2016, since Cambridge Analytica, since Russian interference, this is now a trope in mainstream media. The fact of the matter is, though, is that Muslims and Muslim institutions, personalities, organizers, all of you here, have actually been facing disinformation campaigns and have been tasting what disinformation is, and online toxicity and doxing and all these kind of takeout tactics in the digital space. We have been experiencing this as a community and as institutional leadership well before this became a fashionable mainstream conversation. And I don't mean fashionable to make it light, but the fact is that now it's actually something of a kind of living room conversation or coffee shop conversation. People recognize this word disinformation or misinformation, and they understand that this is part of our political ecosystem now. Well, Muslim institutions have been facing this pattern of disinformation for quite some time, whether they are from powerful, coordinated actors with a lot of money, with a lot of sophistication, or whether or not these are just sort of rumor mills by individuals and sort of chat groups. The fact of the matter is that oftentimes, unbeknownst to others, there are actually forces, very big forces, behind some of these smaller chatter boxes. So what I'd like to do today is give you two very quick examples of the way these sort of fringe conversations move into the mainstream and demonstrate how Islamophobia and standard anti-Muslim tactics really are representative of overall disinformation patterns. And so the goal here is to make people recognize that anti-Muslim bigotry, Islamophobia is not simply some kind of attitude, some kind of problem that needs to be overcome by tolerance, but a very serious political problem that we have in this country that is used to manipulate the electorate. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, the few minutes I have left, to jump into a couple of quick examples. I want to give you one example. The hallmark of a disinformation campaign is to publish pseudo-journalistic and pseudo-academic work on a number of different locations through shared domains to make it look like this is a credible third-party type of verified report. So there is a headline article that reads as if it's documenting an actual report or study, and it says 92% of new Muslim candidates won't express support for the Constitution. What this actually is a fringe author writing on sort of paid domains, paid blogs, and all this person did was actually send in a supposed survey to 36 American Muslim candidates that are running for office. And these are kind of, just to your info, your info about candidate campaign. And the kinds of questions that this person asked were things like, in America, Muslims are, in America, freedom of religion is part of our foundational principles. So that also means that you can insult the Prophet, and you can convert away from Islam, and you can, insult Islam. Do you uncategorically support the right to insult the Prophet Muhammad? Clearly, nobody's going to respond to this thing. So the guy gets 29 no replies, 5 auto replies, 3 candidates actually responded. And so that comes up to 92% of Muslim candidates won't express support for the Constitution. Everybody following me there? That's the kind of hustle. So then he writes up that report, spreads it around. It gets shared on Twitter, Facebook, through these other blogs. And then it reaches Breitbart and Ted Cruz's pages, however, through this strategy called a guest post strategy. You understand how that is when somebody tags you. Well, for major outlets like Breitbart and Ted Cruz, I can't just tag them. They have to be allowed to be tagged. And so by that tagging function, which isn't a direct post, they also get that audience and that amplification. So through the media monitoring software that we work with, we find that we have about 10 million total reach for that story. We have another one here. I'm gonna go right through this very quickly because I wanna respect the time here. Amar Campa-Najjar, folks know him, running in a very contested seat in Southern California, writes his own blog about how he grew up in a mosque where it just so happened that some of the 9/11 hijackers were there. He wrote his own blog in a mainstream outlet, the Hill, talking about this. A fringe author, again, writes on her own blog / fake news site about the fact that he did this, and she, manipulates the headline in such a way to make it sound intelligible. She circulates it again. It's retweeted by a number of folks, and then it's retweeted by one account called Anthem Respect. And through Anthem Respect, it then reaches sort of mainstream Twitter space, conservative Twitter space, which with again another reach of about close to 10 million. But who is Anthem Space or Anthem Respect? What is this website? Who is this account? We go through, we start digging who it is. All across the website, there are QAnon conspiracy theory references, hashtags, etc. We start breaking it down further and further. We find out that this website and all of its affiliated domains are controlled by Michael Flynn's sisters. So I'm going to stop there because I think that does the job of demonstrating sort of reach, fringe, center, power, small actor. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
We wish we had more time to go through that with you, Abbas, because it's information that a lot of folks in general don't know. And for me as a digital organizer, and I know there's digital organizers in the crowd too, that's the type of information that we're always fight up against, because we know that the Islamophobia industry is heavily funded online. It's not just at the fringes anymore, right? But
yeah,
in those ways that it's reified. So thank you so much for illuminating that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we have some questions that are also rolling in. And I wanted to remind people that we will be getting to them at the end. Really appreciate your question, John. And I think that some folks might touch upon that a little bit as we have this conversation, but we're definitely going to hold that for the end as well. So some of the disinformation that Abbas is talking about, and we see this with Amar's campaign as well, definitely makes its way to the mainstream and out of the digital sphere and affects people in real life. And Mohammed, you worked on just, getting rid of and dismantling barriers for folks who are trying to enter the political sphere in real life as well. So can you tell us a little bit about institutional barriers that Muslims face, and how you and the work that you do at Jetpack help Muslims overcome those challenges?
Sure, thank you, Kifa. And thank you, Abbas, for that presentation, because it does, that is definitely part of the, one of the many challenges that Muslim candidates face. So I wanted to start off by talking about how, as a general rule, Muslims in America are not raised to think about politics as a potential, as a, something that you're supposed to be thinking about, or just like, a potential profession, right? And so what that means is that we don't necessarily volunteer for campaigns. We don't think about internships in either political offices or for different campaigns. And what results, and that then influences how much knowledge we have about the political process. So the political process is very different. I mean, it has different parts, right? There's like the electoral, and then there's the more government-based policy. I think a lot of people consider, think about the policy side a lot, and things that we see in pop culture and kind of what we grow up as, thinking about the meetings you take. But okay, so that's what's popping up. But the biggest problem for many Muslim candidates, because we haven't really, because like electoral politics is not baked into our culture, is that we don't know the very basics of what you need to know when you want to run for office. And that's what JetPAC essentially was formed or was launched to do, is to remove some of these knowledge barriers. And that includes learning how to fundraise. It includes how to build media relations. It includes how to hire staff, because frankly, like, your political staff is one of the most important decisions you're going to make. And especially as a first-time candidate who probably will need to lean on people who have more experience than you, knowing who to hire and how to vet them is critical. And as is the case with every profession, the more you know about the profession, the better the easier it is for you to vet them. So we teach people about what to look for in terms of what your field director needs to know. What is their day-to-day like? How do you make sure that they are, how do you make sure that you hold them accountable, but also like what kind of, what expectations should you have of their, of their work? And the same thing goes for every, other part of their staff. The other, and frankly though, like, before they even get to all of that, the most important thing is fundraising. Muslim candidates are immediately seen as non-viable by everyone involved, including the Muslim community, because we have traditionally not, been involved in the political process. And because many people in the community still think that, still fairly, are very aware of the Islamophobia that exists in our society, and will say there's no way we can win knowing that, we are facing all this bigotry in general. So that is, so fundraising immediately becomes a problem. That's where we teach people essentially like best practices to overcome some of these barriers. And I don't want to get into the details, we can, if people have questions, we'll be happy to talk about that. But essentially it's, like leaning on the people who know you to begin with. And that doesn't have to be your own Muslim community. It's just anyone going to them long before you launch, going to different people, sitting down one-on-one as much as you can, asking people for pledges, getting that money so that you have a foundation that you can then showcase to showcase your viability. The other one that I want to talk about is media. Blackouts are very common. Again, there is this presumption that if you're a Muslim, you're not going to win. You're not really a news story unless you're being harassed, or you're facing these disinformation campaigns. Then they'll write about you, but it's often just like from a negative perspective, right? The other way they'll write about you is if something bad happens, or if there's like this assumption that, oh, there's like a national security, again, lens. It's always viewed through this one lens rather than, these other policy areas. And the blackouts even happen if you actually have like worthwhile news, like a big endorsement might not be shared by local media because, well, again, who are you? You're just a Muslim candidate. Why does that matter? So how do you, we teach people how to combat that. And the way that to do it is just like to do anything. It's like everything else. You focus on relationship building. Long before you launch, you reach out to people, you reach out to members of the press, and that's unfortunately dwindling in local press, but you reach out, you sit down one-on-ones, you share your side of the story, you talk about why you might be running, the work you've done, and you establish that relationship, and you continue establishing that relationship. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be covered, but it does guarantee that at the very least, people will understand some of the barriers you're facing, but also the expertise that you're bringing if issues come up that they might reach out to you. Endorsements, that's one of the toughest ones. Most groups, they look at very traditional metrics for viability. And one of them is, how long have you known someone? Very often endorsements are strictly based on relationships that you've had with people. So that's always going to be an uphill battle. But if you can raise a lot of money, if you can, essentially treat it as any kind of venture where you have to go in very prepared, explain your campaign, make the best pitch you can make, and show how organized you are and why, number of IDs you have, for instance, if you started knocking on doors. But ultimately, even if you don't get them, the goal with endorsements is also, again, it's like to build relationships with organizations. And that's something a lot of us just don't know until we start working in politics, is that that's what other people do. The reason, some candidates are closer to the establishment is because they reach out to the establishment, they sit down, they have these conversations. So they're important with endorsements, it's just important to sit down with people and actually do that outreach. It's just very critical. Whether you get the endorsements this round or in the future, you're building a relationship that can be really valuable for your career. And I think the last part that I wanted to just mention is that because Islamophobia is so ingrained in our society, one of the biggest hurdles for Muslim candidates is tuning out the noise. Frankly, you're going to face a lot of, or Muslim candidates face a lot of hate online. They face a lot of death threats. They face a lot of assumptions about where we stand on a million different issues because of the religion, and because there is this assumption that we're a monolith, like that has been brought up by Abbas and others on the panel, and it's very difficult for people to look at that disinformation and to look at these smears that are happening and really focus on the fact that you just have to tune it out. It's noise. It doesn't really matter, because ultimately your voters are not necessarily on Twitter. And so that's just something that we emphasize a lot, and try to make sure that people understand that when people go after you, by all means, make sure you take screenshots, make sure you pass that along to authorities that can investigate whether or not they're serious, could potentially be serious threats. But other than that, focus on your campaign. Ultimately, it's about reaching out to your voters, the people who you want to represent, not some person in California who hates you, if you're in Texas, and vice versa. And continue just tune out that noise. It's very painful. It's a lot of it gives you a lot of anxiety, but that's a big deal. That's a big factor. I'm going to finish by saying that I'm just getting a message here that I only have 1 minute left. So I want to finish by saying that the good thing that's happening is that despite all these challenges that we have, and the fact that we're going to continue facing these challenges for many years ahead, so many more Muslims are running for office and have been since 2017, and we're winning. We're winning in local races, and obviously we've got our 3 amazing members of Congress right now, and Congresswomen Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Andre Carson, and Congressman Carson. What's so great about that for us is that they're showing people that you can do this, right? But also now, when we're actually reaching out for endorsements and et cetera, people are taking us a little bit more seriously. So we're still not even close to where we want to be, for sure, but it is getting better. And the reason it's getting better too is that in addition to this small panel, there are many other groups across the country working to make sure that this happens, right? Like Jetpack trains, a percentage of all the people that are running and winning. But in addition to that, many other people are contributing to this process, and we're learning really, really fast. The accelerated level at which our community is learning, I think, is really impressive. And it's because so many people are doing this work across the board.
Thanks so much, Mohammed. That was so helpful to go through. I learned a lot. And actually, thank you for ending on a note where, yes, there's a lot of work being done, even though there are a lot of challenges that our communities are facing. And some of those institutional barriers are, things that places like Polygon are also confronting and challenging and fighting against. So what are the education that you're particularly doing within masajid, mosques, and other Muslim institutions is also really groundbreaking, because it allows for us to politicize certain spaces and also to create a force and hubs for our communities throughout the country. So how are you mobilizing people And, you know, I know that you mentioned some WhatsApp stuff that you're doing too. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So as you mentioned, a big focus for Polygon is education and educating Muslims and allies just how to get engaged in the process. And we focus on Congress, but a lot of the skills that we teach can be transferred to the local and state level as well. So one of the things that we've been doing for the past 3.5 years has been our Congressional Advocacy 101 trainings. We've also done 2.0 trainings, which we did at Netroots last year. And those have been really great to do at Islamic centers as well as mosques because that's just a natural fit for the community of finding a concentrated number of people that want to actually engage. And I have a stat here that I want to show you guys. There's a PowerPoint slide I have. Talking about how frequent mosque attendance is actually linked to greater civic engagement. So this was a study done by ISPU, the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding. And it showed that, you know, if you're actually engaged in the mosque, you're more likely to be registered to vote or plan to vote or to be included in the community. And this is really important because that means that mosque community are more primed. You kind of overcome the additional initial barriers that you might have in getting people to understand why you need to be engaged. These people are already engaged in attending their mosque, whether it's Friday prayers or it's lectures or things for their programs for their kids. So this is a really great way to mobilize, and I want to see an increase in that. And so one thing that we've been doing around the elections in particular is talking with mosques about what it is that you can and can't do in an election year for religious institutions, for 501c3 religious institutions. What can you say, and how do you make sure that doesn't cross any legal barriers that you have or legal issues? You don't want to have problems with that. So we've been in talks with them about potentially presenting on, you know, how they can get engaged, which is really important because this is a critical election year. 2016 was a critical election year. 2018, our community did really well in coming out to vote in the midterms as well, and so we want to continue to see that. So one area is definitely mobilizing mosques. The other area is on a related note, the WhatsApp groups that you're talking about. In the city of Houston, where I'm from, there are quite a few number of huge WhatsApp groups of aunties who participate in these Quran halakas, and they are basically learning Quran or they're learning Arabic, and they're studying the text and going through it every week. And so it's a natural place for us to tap into. And it was actually an auntie in the community who gave me this idea, because she was like, you know, you really need to help these people understand that studying the Quran is just as important as voting, or just as important as being civically engaged. Because if you look at our religious tradition, our prophetic tradition, our prophetic model, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was definitely engaged in politics and the community, and this is something that we want to emulate. It's very non-Muslim to be apolitical or not engaged, so we want to bring that back to the community, and one great way is to talk to these WhatsApp groups or meet with the leaders or the teachers who coordinate them, and help them either plug into a mosque training that's existing, or just ask questions, or ask them if they're registered to vote. So that's another strategy that we're definitely doing. We also came out with these civic engagement toolkits. So Polygon puts out an August Recess Advocacy Toolkit every year. And so basically, since your members of Congress are in their home districts, this is a really good time for you to meet with them or their staff, and not have to go all the way to DC to be able to get some time with them to talk with them. So we put out our own and collaborated with an interfaith one that we do with Faithful Democracy. We're part of several working groups, including Faithful Democracy, and also election security and making sure that marginalized communities are not presented barriers to vote. So this toolkit kind of goes through that as well. And then we'll talk about this later, but we also worked with Muslim orgs, some of them here on this panel, to create a Muslim civic engagement toolkit that we're hoping that we can push out to mosques and to Islamic centers and faith leaders to help them see how exactly they can plug in during this election and why their faith compels them to do so. So I think a lot of the groundwork and education is something that we're really focusing on. And we're hoping that it not only works in 2020 elections, but continues on for generations to come. And that, you know, as Muhammad mentioned earlier, we don't really grow up hearing this stuff in the mosque and I think now we're finally all have kind of the message that, okay, yeah, we all need to vote, but then what? How do you hold your elected officials accountable? How do you run for office? Like, these are all things that we need to be doing, and I'm glad to see that we're doing more of. And so Polygon is going to continue to work on that.
Thanks so much, Warda. I sent Warda a time check, but she beat it. So, and thank you so much for uplifting the creative ways that we need to be engaging our communities. A lot of times people in the chats have been asking, how do we engage our elders? And they're really loving the WhatsApp idea. So we really hope that you all walk away using all of the tools at your disposal, especially during COVID, to think about how to mobilize people that, you know, are all across our community and really want to be engaged in the political process. We're all probably going to be sending you videos and different multilingual tools to also spread on WhatsApp. So please do that. One of those touch points that you made is that, you know, those hubs that are going to be not just important for our political future, but also just right now for 2020, we need to think through those battleground states that a lot of Muslims actually have potential to, you know, turn the needle, move the needle. So, you know, Mohammed, you do a lot of work, especially in those battleground states, to mobilize Muslim folks to vote, and you know that they play a pivotal role. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to share my screen so that folks can kind of see what I'm talking about. When I'm looking at how valuable the Muslim vote is, I'm really looking at, as Kifah mentioned, the really 4 priority states that nationwide every campaign, every presidential kind of analyst has been talking about, which has been Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Florida. And so even looking at just the numbers of how Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania alone were decided in 2016, I mean, we have them here in Michigan, it was 10,700 votes. In Wisconsin, it was 22,000 votes. In Pennsylvania, it was 44,000 votes. Now, when we think about how big is the Muslim community in each one of these states, we do have access to VAN where we're able to have kind of like a Muslim list or a likely Muslim list where we can call and text people, the Muslim Americans that are in these states. In Michigan, we have 270,000 registered Muslims alone. In Pennsylvania, we have 150,000, but we know that that data is actually a little bit skewed because, as Abbas mentioned, when we're running a name match algorithm, it doesn't actually pick up a lot of the African-American Muslim community that we see in regards to even our ethnicity models and religion code. So we know that we have over 150,000 in Pennsylvania. In Wisconsin, we have 120,000, predominantly those that live in the Milwaukee County. And Milwaukee County is actually one of the most important counties because it adds up to about 1/3 of the electorate when you're looking at which way Wisconsin will go. And in Florida, of course, it's 29 electoral votes. So we're really going to pay attention to Florida as well. And we have 170,000 registered Muslims in Florida. So when we start to really take a look at the analyses of how we can win in 2020, we could even go deep into what counties look like. If we look at Wayne County in Michigan, Wayne County in regards to how many votes Obama got versus Hillary Clinton, it was about 75,000. We have 110,000 registered Muslims in Wayne County alone, right? So when we look at whether or not the Muslim vote can swing this election, it absolutely can, without a doubt. So even when we're looking at the numbers in regards to the electoral votes, we have 75 electoral votes that are swingable, even if everything else stays the same. And just some fun facts that I did want to share. In Wisconsin, third-party votes went from 33,000 in 2012 to 188,000 in 2016. So third-party votes literally decided Wisconsin's fate in 2016. And in Florida, a lot of people think that the Muslim community is just a progressive community or a democratic community. Well, we're not. 58% of Muslim Americans that are in Florida are either Republican or unaffiliated. So we know that a lot of what we have to do revolved around the misinformation and disinformation that Abbas mentioned, revolved around that Muhammad mentioned in regards to something that just comes natural to us. And there's this uneducated portion that we have to make sure that we do educate. And a lot of what Sister Warda was mentioning in regards to being involved as much as we can is a key component to making sure that as we start to talk to our communities, recognizing and hearing out what issues are most important to them, it's really key to really get there in order for us to get to the finish line the way that we really want to finish. And I'm going to use an example in regards to the Muslim vote, which is in Virginia. So in Virginia, I was the executive director, and I'm still the executive director in Virginia. But I came into Virginia with only one Muslim who was elected into office in 2017. And it was an already engaged, right? A lot of people who were already doing some amazing work in Virginia. And the only thing that was really missing was just the strategies, the piece of everyone coming together and the data. We went from having one Muslim elected official in Virginia to having 9 as of today. Right? And all of it was just revolved, and this is at every level of government. As Muhammad mentioned, a lot of it is just making sure that we are an informed community. And so I do believe that as a Muslim community moving forward, as a Muslim American community, it's understanding the power of our vote, but also understanding the process as we move forward, and as community leaders and as a constituency, making sure that we take on the responsibility of being informed voters is really the key for us moving forward in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. That was so insightful and a really great way to sort of wrap up our large portion for all of the panelists, because it shows how pivotal Muslims will be in the political future of those states, but also just, in general. So I want to time check us all. We have about 7 minutes. We do have a couple of questions from the crowd, and we do have one final question or a thought that we wanted to leave folks with. All of the organizations here have been working very hard on something called the Muslim Power Poll, which was created to survey Muslims across the country and kind of get a sense of what are the issues that are really pressing for our communities. And we surveyed more than 1,500 people, and we have some of the results here. And I wanted to make sure to share this with everyone. We can talk about it a little bit, but since we have about 6 minutes, I just, ask that if anyone wants to discuss this from the panel, did any of these results surprise you? What do you think that these results mean for us in terms of how we're organizing this year and beyond it? And if anyone has any final thoughts, and then we can hop into questions. So I'm going to give us about 2 minutes for that question that I just asked, and then ask questions from the crowd.
I can just add here, I don't know if it wasn't surprising, but it was a confirmation of what Muslims have been saying all along, that like we don't only care about national security and foreign policy, because that's what our community is often pegged with. I mean, none of us will forget the DNC 2016 stage when Bill Clinton, said that, oh, if you want to stay and fight, Muslims are welcome. Like, it's not okay to securitize our community. And I think these results very much show that our concerns are very much in line with non-Muslim Americans as well, just right, the general American population. I will say civil rights is an issue because as things like the Muslim travel ban, those do disproportionately impact us, communities of color, and a large proportion of our community is communities of color. But if you look at the other things, climate change, education, healthcare, I mean, foreign policy is sixth in line, immigration, same thing. So I just thought it was a nice confirmation of what we, activists have been saying all along.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're such a diverse community. Of course, we have a diverse set of issues that we'll be concerned by. Does anyone else want to add anything before we head to the folks in the audience? Okay, well, we hope that we left you with some food for thought, maybe. And like I mentioned, we will be sharing out resources based on the facts that we threw up on the screen just now. There's going to be a report that comes out. We're excited for folks to read it, and please share it widely on WhatsApp or in person, whatever it might be. One of the questions that we have is from Sabiha, and Sabiha said, are you tracking the impact of right-wing Hindutva influence on the South Asian civic engagement terrain? Many American Desis are voting blue, but are also part of anti-Muslim Hindu fascist politics. Do you have any advice for South Asians in America who are dealing with Islamophobia within the diaspora? And Abbas, I'm going to pass it to you to help us address that.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's a very timely question, and it's one that most people in the South Asian community are tracking. It's a major problem, not just for Muslims, but also for just anybody from a South Asian background who's concerned about the rise of the far right, its influence in India, on Indian politics, on the region, and then on the diaspora. Yes, my office is directly impacting this influence. We will actually be launching a resource portal on Islamophobia.org next week about this. But as far as how to get involved or how to counter this, the one thing you cannot do is give in to skepticism or apathy. I believe it was Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, who said, it's not that people don't vote because they're apathetic, it's because they're skeptical, right? They're skeptical that the politics and the political system can answer them. We are all disappointed in the political system. We are all disappointed with what's going on. What you have to do is make sure that you don't give into that, you overcome that, and understand that that's part of the process. So even if you see a very high influence of sort of BJP or Modi supporting activists in the DNC or the RNC, wherever it is, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed at the table. Get in the table, hold your own that table, and keep pushing forward. And hats off to all of my brothers and sisters here on this panel that are doing that hard work to get out there. So support, you know, Engage, support Polygon, support Jetpack, and support Empower.
Yes, thank you so much, Abbas, and support CARE, of course, as always. And I am going to drop, that's his own organization. I'm going to drop a source as well that I think would be helpful is Equality Labs. If you'd like to check out the work that they do, they address a lot of the issues that you brought up, Sabiha. Thank you for mentioning. And we hope that we answered the rest of your questions while we were having this conversation. If not, please feel free to contact us. I want to thank all of the folks who joined us today, Muhammad Ghulam, Muhammad Missouri, Abbas, and Warda, and just for shedding so much light on the issues, but also in spite of all of the issues, the ways that Muslims in America are overcoming these challenges and politicizing spaces and in the digital sphere and in so many other ways. And we know we would be remiss if we didn't mention that, you know, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many other issues that Muslims are facing. We are not representative of the vast majority of Muslims in this country, actually, in terms of all of the other issues, whether it's race, class, or, you know, education, any other aspect that people are actually trying to fight for their rights within. Like, we're not entirely representative, and we know that, but we hope that we were able to shed a little bit of light today in this conversation. So thank you so much. I'm going to encourage our volunteers, our panelists, to drop their emails in the chat so that if folks are interested, you can write down our emails and get in touch with us. And we hope you all have a great time at the rest of Netroots. Thank you so much, Netroots, for having us. We hope to see you all in person next year.